runway 8 kilo, you're cleared for takeoff.
This is your captain speaking. If you love travel, and we know you do, buckle your seatbelts and keep your tray tables in the upright position. You should be seeing the illuminated fun signs throughout the aircraft, because we're about to take off on a chat of epic proportions. Welcome to Tray Tables and Time Zones, the podcast where travel isn't just about taking vacations. It's about enriching your life. We'll dive into the highs, the lows, and the downright absurd moments that come with exploring the world. Whether it's food poisoning on a long-haul flight, trekking to Mount Everest Base Camp, or traveling to Disney parks worldwide, we cover it all. Serious at moments, but mostly we're here to laugh and share some brutally honest travel stories. So let's do it, one time zone at a time. This is Tray Tables and Time Zones, and this is your host, Josh Bogle.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tray Tables and Time Zones. I'm your host, Josh Bogle. And on this episode, we continue our Japan series. In the first episode of this series, we really talked about the nuts and bolts of traveling in Japan. You know, what you'll need on a daily basis, traveling around the city or traveling around the country even. Cell phone usage, how to get Wi-Fi, where to stay, what types of hotels to stay in. All those types of things that are really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of what you'll need to do to hopefully have an enjoyable and successful trip when you travel to Japan, specifically in the Tokyo region. But on this episode, we're going to have a little bit more fun. It won't be as technical. It's going to be more about the trips that I have taken over the years. So my Japan travel background really began in the summer of 2018 with a solo trip to Tokyo, almost exclusively. I had a day trip in there, but for the most part, that trip was bound for nothing but Tokyo. And then my second trip to Japan was in conjunction with a trip also to see Seoul in Korea. And again, this was a solo trip, so it was just me traveling. And that worked out actually really well because this trip took place at the end of January and into the beginning of February in 2020. And so we all know what was getting ready to break at that time, and there was a bit of it showing up on that trip. So I'll talk about some more of that later, but I was glad to be by myself and not with family on that one. And then the last trip was very recent. It was actually this summer. So the summer of 2024. And that was a family trip with my wife and two kids. We did 2 weeks in Japan, and that was an absolutely amazing experience. So I've spent over a month in the country at this point, primarily in Tokyo, but also I've spent a decent amount of time in Kyoto. So while I haven't been all over the country, I've got a pretty good grasp on how to do things in Tokyo and how it kind of works once you're there. So, this episode, I'd like to talk about those trips just to give you some ideas on where you might want to stay and the experiences you might want to do, because I can tell you that most of the things that I have done or experienced while in Japan have been incredible experiences, right? I don't really know that I've had a dud or a bad experience or something that I wouldn't, I would just absolutely would not go back and do again. Everything that I've done has been pretty awesome. And so I think it's a pretty good start for people to hear and to think about, are those experiences that you would like to have, right? I mean, there's such a broad range of things to do in Japan. Obviously, you can't get them all in one trip, but you got to start somewhere, right? And so for me, that was starting in Tokyo, and I've slowly begun to work my way out. I don't think that this trip that we just recently did is in any way my last trip to Japan, and I'm sure I will go back many, many times over the years to experience more. I've still got hopes of going up to Sapporo, especially, during the winter. I'd love to go down to like Fukuoka, go see Osaka and Hiroshima. And there's so many places and regions in what is a relatively small country that it provides endless opportunities for adventure and the ability to see new things every time you go, while hitting some of those classics that, at least for me, that I have to do every time I'm in Japan. So we'll start right from the beginning here, and let's talk about, arriving in Japan. So I talked a little bit about this on the last episode, arriving, getting all of your things that you need together, and then getting into the city, right? But I really didn't talk about that experience. I kind of broached it a little bit, but let me just say that at least on my first trip, actually it happens every time. Not as bad. The first time is always the worst. And I say worst, not in that it's a bad thing, but it's just, the most intense experience. Is that at least flying into Narita, Narita is out in the country, and it's about a 45, 50-minute train ride from Narita into the city. So as you're coming in from Narita on the train, at least, now this is, again, my experience on the train, you start out initially and you're kind of in the country, right? You're passing, a lot of rice fields and small farms, and there's not a ton of things out there that you're seeing that give that indication of what's to come. But as you get closer to the city, you start running into more roads and overpasses, and you're starting to see more and more development. But it's still, frankly, it feels kind of like when you're traveling in the suburbs in America, right? Just not on a train, of course, because we really don't have great train capability in this country, at least not for passengers. But anyway, when you're coming in, it really feels like a suburb. It could be anywhere. The buildings are a little different. The cars are a little different. The signage obviously is different because a lot of it's in Japanese. And it doesn't really hit you yet. You haven't gotten that, oh, I'm in Japan thing. I mean, you kind of get the feeling when you're at the airport, you obviously know you're in somewhere different and it's not home, but it doesn't really just grab you yet, at least in my experience. And I think that's because you're so busy at the airport, right? You've got so many things going through your mind of getting through immigration and customs, and you're getting your baggage and getting any things that you may have pre-ordered or getting a SIM card, all that stuff that goes with travel. So you're riding on the train, and it starts to go from a suburb to the city. And I remember coming over a bridge I don't know what river it was, but you came across that bridge, and it was almost like somebody snapped their fingers. Then all of a sudden, Tokyo got really big. And what I mean is the buildings started getting really tall. And the train went from, passing alongside of a road or passing through, open space to feeling like you were in a canyon, because the buildings started going straight up around the track and it felt more closed in. There were people starting to appear all around on the streets and in the train stations that you pass through, because the Kaisei Skyliner that you ride on is a express train, so it doesn't stop at any of the local train stations until it gets to Napori Station. And I'm looking around, and it got really real fast. I mean, there was buildings and people and cars and trains, just everything was all of a sudden there in a really big way. And there was a lot of it. And you would be passing through these buildings, and then there would be a break in the buildings, and you could look back over and see Tokyo. And as far as you could see, it was building after building after building, and of all types and shapes. And you're just like, oh, this place is really big. And I think I mentioned this too before. I live in Houston, Texas, and it's the fourth largest city in America right now. And it is spread out, and we've got a lot of highways and a lot of big suburbs. It's a really big place, and it in no way could be compared to Tokyo as far as the feeling you get, because Tokyo is on top of you. It's a very vertical city. Most things are built up because they have to accommodate the 34 plus million people that live there and work there. So things go up. And so you feel kind of like you're in canyons all the time. And I was just, man, my mind was going 100 miles a second because I was overwhelmed. I'm not going to lie. And I've traveled to a lot of places and been to a lot of places, but something about Tokyo just overwhelmed me. I was just like, wow, this is a totally different place, right? And so I remember getting to Napori Station, and I got off the train, and I had Google Maps up because I was, looking for my hotel, which luckily turned out to be like a 2.5 minute walk from the train station. But I remember walking out of Napori Station. I had to go down this long staircase to get down to street level. And I'm carrying my bag and, everything. And I'm walking down here and I'm kind of cursing because I'm having to carry my bag down these stairs. And I got down on the street level, and man, it's just like, bam, it just hits you, right? Because you truly get all the sound, right? You're in the city at that point. There's cars whizzing by. There's people everywhere. There's sounds everywhere. I mean, you are in it now. I mean, it is full tilt. So I walked down the sidewalk, made note of the Family Mart because I had listened to enough podcasts and videos and everything else that I knew about the convenience stores, and I knew about what I could get there as far as food. And I was super excited because I really wanted a egg salad sandwich to try them because I'd heard so much hype. So I knew there was a Family Mart close, and I had seen kind of in the distance there was like a McDonald's and a Moss Burger and a couple other places that were familiar to me. So I knew at least if it all went to hell that I could at least go get a shitty McDonald's hamburger to fill my stomach up. And there was this Family Mart. So if I couldn't figure anything else out, I could probably get myself, at least some type of food. And so I walked down to the hotel, and I was there early, so I couldn't check in yet, but they were really, really nice. They worked with me on trying to understand what I was saying because it was a Japanese business hotel. And so they're used to more or less Japanese businessmen staying there or tourists that come into the city, and maybe not necessarily a lot of tourists from out of the country. When I say they're used to tourists coming in, I meant, Japanese tourists. So they were very friendly, and they offered to hold my bag for me while I waited on check-in. And I was looking at the clock, and I think I had a couple of hours, before I could check in. And I didn't want to sit in the hotel and just, scroll my phone or whatever at that point. I wanted to not lose that time. So I had read about a kind of a Japanese hot pot restaurant that I thought looked really good. And it was basically one of the ones where, they bring the pot to your table, and they have a burner on the table, and you cook everything there, right? In these different kinds of broth, and you have vegetables and beef and, or, whatever kind of meat you want, and you cook it at the table. So it seemed like a good idea, right? And I can't remember where I first heard about this place. It had to have been from YouTube, maybe. Anyway, so I was like, all right, well, let's get a couple things out of the way, right? Let's experience riding on the Yamanote line, the circle line. Let's experience that, and let's go get something to eat. Just so happened that this place that I was going to go get something to eat was all the way down on the west side of town in Shibuya. And we all know what's in Shibuya, the Shibuya crossing, right? The Shibuya scramble, which I think they say every time the lights change and it opens for pedestrians to cross the streets there, it's like on average 3,000 people cross the street there. Great. I can go see that, and then I can go eat. So I'm riding on the Yamanote line, and that's an experience in and of itself because now I'm really seeing all of Tokyo, in the heart of Tokyo, right? And I'm not going to lie, I'm a little scared, and I'm a little nervous because it's just so much happening all around you, and everything is new. And it's kind of that feeling you get the very first time you fly overseas and you go to a place where English isn't the dominant language, because that happened to me in Hong Kong, right? The first international trip I really ever took was into Hong Kong, and we got off the plane in Hong Kong, and I mean, it was not English. I mean, it was not the predominant language. And so that's always interesting the first time you hear other languages being spoken primarily over your own. And so I'm riding on the train and we're going along and we're stopping at these huge train stations, right? Like I can see from the windows of the train that these places are big. You know, the platforms are big, they're busy, there's people everywhere. I mean, it's wild and chaotic. And so I finally get to Shibuya and I get off the train and I'm like, all right, while I'm here, I've got to see the crossing and I've got to go see the dog statue of Hachiko. I believe that's how you say it, which is a famous dog that followed its master to the train station forever and would come and wait on him when he got off the train. And then he passed away and the dog kept coming for years, right? So there's a statue to this dog because it was so loyal and such a good dog, even to its master in death, right? So it's a cool thing to see. And so I'm trying to figure out where in the hell this restaurant is, and I can't find it. I'm like walking down these streets in Shibuya, and again, overwhelmed, not thinking straight. You know, I'm just dealing with all the sound inputs and the sights, and I'm also thinking, you know, holy shit, I'm finally in effing Japan. I can't believe this. And so my mind's going a mile a minute, or a million miles a minute, I guess would be the better thing to say. Anyway. So I finally get to the address where I think this restaurant's at. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking up and it's this tall building. It's probably, I don't know, 15 stories, 20 stories. All right. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, well, where the hell is it? Because I'm used to looking into a lobby and seeing the restaurants on the ground floor of buildings. And so I look at my phone again and I see the name and I'm like, where the hell is this thing? Well, it turns out it was like on the 8th floor. You got to go into the building and then look at the board to figure it out, because in Japan, they put restaurants on all type of floors, right? It's not the bottom floor. It's not in the lobby. It's not even just the basement. It could be 10th floor, 12th floor, 8th floor of a random building on the street. And that's where it's at. And you won't see it. Sometimes they'll be writing on the outside of the building like signage. I mean, if you can read it. But no. It is possible that the restaurant is on a random floor in a building. So I learned that lesson very quick. And I never took for granted to look up at the buildings and then go ahead and walk inside if I was confused about where something might be, and figure it out on a map or some type of signage board that told what was in the building, because can't take that for granted that it's just going to be right there in front of you. Not in Japan, or at least not in Tokyo. So anyway, I went in there and ate, and it was amazing. Everybody was really nice to me, no problems. They didn't speak a lot of English. I obviously didn't speak a lot of Japanese, but we made it work. They were very friendly. It was a great meal. It was a nice introduction to Japan. And so got done, got back on the train and went back to Napori Station where I was staying and got checked in, got my room, walked into the room. And like I mentioned in the first episode about staying in business hotels, the room was so small. I mean, I'm a big guy and I'm an American, so I'm used to things being bigger than they probably need to be. But this room was really small. But I will tell you, I loved that little room. I learned to love it. It was great for what I used it for, right? Because I was out all day long and I would just come back to it having swung by the Family Mart to grab some snacks for the evening. And I would come into the room, lay down on the bed, turn on the TV, just wiped out, tired, have some snacks, watch some Japanese TV, laugh at some of the shows because they were, quirky as hell. I had no idea what they were saying, but it was a fun way to unwind and take a shower, go to bed. And that's exactly what I needed from the room. And that's exactly what it gave me. It gave me a place to sleep, a place to take a shower, a place to relax at the end of the day without anything else. And it was a great price. Like I said, I think it was $60 a night, that first hotel I stayed at. In fact, I liked that hotel so much that I stayed in the exact same hotel the second trip I took to Japan. And I would probably stay there again if I go back or when I go back as a solo traveler, because it's perfect for that, right? I mean, like I said, you can stay there as a solo traveler or maybe a couple, but I wouldn't push it, much past that because you're out of room pretty quickly. Great spot though, great hotel. And actually Napori Station I love staying there because while it is busy, it is not nearly as busy as a lot of the other major stations on the Yamanote line. And therefore it gives you a little bit of a break from the craziness. Not much, but a little bit. It's noticeable. I will tell you that. Right. So, like I said, I checked into the hotel and I got ready to go back out because I was somewhat jet lagged, not horribly bad. In fact, usually I don't get jet lagged going to Asia from the US very often. Usually my jet lag hits when I come back. When I fly back from Asia, especially to the US, I will be a worthless pile of shit for a couple of days. I don't know what it is, but the jet lag hits me hard on the way back. So while I felt a little jet lagged when I got there, it wasn't bad, right? It was more about just being overwhelmed by the city. And so I fought through that and headed back out to go explore. And that was a pretty awesome experience. Now I'll talk more about the things to do kind of as a whole here shortly, but I just wanted to share that it really is tough that first day you're in country. I mean, it really will wear you the hell out. And especially the first time you visit Japan, it's going to just be an ever loving assault on your senses. Right? I mean, every sense you have is going to be just bombarded with lights and people and sound and size. And I mean, it gives you everything right out of the gate and you're not ready for it. Like I said, I've traveled there several times, and the times after that first trip, I still got that feeling. Not as bad, because I knew what to expect at that point. I was ready for it. It still hits you, and you still kind of feel a little something. You feel strange or a little off, but it's not as bad. But that first time, I mean, if the folks that are listening to this podcast, if they haven't been yet to Japan and you're going to go, I'm just telling you right now, that first day for sure is going to be a real eye opener. Because holy shit, what an experience, right? While it's tough on your body and your mind and you're trying to wrap your head around it, it's fucking amazing because you're like, what kind of city can kind of put off this vibe, right? It's just got this amazing, overwhelming vibe that's just, while it bothers you at first because you're not used to it, man, it sucks you in so hard. You crave that craziness and the liveliness of Japan and of Tokyo when you come home. I mean, I do. I still think about it. I miss it a lot. I really do. So second trip, like I said, I stayed at the same exact hotel, and I would highly recommend it. Not only the hotel, which is the APA in Napori, but also that area. It's kind of in the middle of everything. It's on the northern side of the Yamanote line. You've got Napori Station close, and you can literally walk to the next station if you needed to, which is Nishi Napori. And if you go on the eastbound trains, you're going to get to Ueno, Akihabara, and Tokyo Station pretty quickly. And if you take the westbound trains, it's going to take you more toward Ikebukuro, Shibuya, and Shinjuku, and Harajuku, and all those places. So it's kind of in the middle, and it's just a great way to get around the city, at least to me, because like I said, it gives you a little bit of respite, but it's very well positioned for a ton of experiences. So stayed there the second trip, and then on the third trip, to talk about lodging, at least in Tokyo, we stayed in a hotel in Okachimachi, which is the very next station on the Yamanote line south of Ueno. And again, this turned out to be just a splendid place to stay. Now, my requirements were different this time, and that's why we stayed in a different place, because my wife was with me, and so were my kids, who are 15 and 11. So they obviously would want their own space as well. We wanted to find a hotel that would give them plenty of room because, this was a lot for them too. This was going to be their first trip to Japan. And while they had traveled internationally by this point to Europe and to some other places, they had not been to Asia, and especially they hadn't been to Japan. So the experience was going to be overwhelming to them as well. So I wanted to make sure that they had plenty of space to, to stretch out and be kids, right? And if they wanted to play on their iPad for a while or whatever, or talk to friends or whatever it may be, they would have that. And frankly, that's a hard thing to do in Tokyo because a lot of the rooms are small or are made for, smaller groups. And so certainly not what an American would think of as a big hotel room. So I did a lot of research and I found this Mamoru hotel chain. And man, I'll tell you what, it was fantastic. Their rooms, they have several different sizes, right? But they're all kind of based on a apartment style hotel. In that the room we had, which was one of the bigger ones, granted, it was, I think they called it a Japanese apartment, had a kind of dining / living room. It had a tatami room, which you could sleep a couple of people on if you wanted to, on a more traditional, Japanese futon style bed. It had a queen bed that my wife and I slept on, and then it had bunk beds, and that's what the kids slept on. And then it had a bathroom that had the toilet was separated in a water closet from like the shower and the sink area. It was great. I mean, we had a refrigerator, we had a microwave, we had, storage, plenty of closets. I would have liked for it to have had more drawers, but that's a small quibble of mine. It was fantastic. It was a great place to stay. We really enjoyed that hotel. We were there for 6 nights? And it was just great. And Okachimachi, where we stayed, turned out to be a fantastic little spot because you had a 3-minute walk to the train station to get on the Yamanote line. I mean, that's fantastic. We had a Don Quixote very close. I think it was probably another 3-minute walk. And if you know what Don Quixote is, then you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say Don Quixote in Japan is I don't even know how to explain it, like a variety store. It's a kind of a department store, but it's like a discount department store, right? And they have everything. Usually Don Quixotes are several floors of a building, and they'll have one, like food floor where it's almost like a mini grocery store. And then they'll have the main floor, which is usually a lot of like makeup and cosmetics or tourist type things that we would be looking for as tourists, sunscreen and toothbrushes and things like that. But like all of the viral hair care products, like my daughter had a huge list of things she wanted to get, and so did my wife, of hair care and cosmetics in Japan. I mean, Don Quixote had damn near all of them. Right. And at really reasonable prices. And they have drinks and they have luggage and exercise equipment and electronics. They have all kinds of stuff. You can go into a Don Quixote and get lost and just be amazed by the amount of stuff that's sitting around in there that you can buy. Be forewarned. The very first time I went into one, I had a big backpack on. The aisles, they're not wide. So be careful if you've got like on a backpack or whatever, because you'll just start knocking shit over. I did, and I felt like an ass. So just be aware of that the stores are packed full of stuff and the aisles are not very wide. Just a little tip so you don't feel like an asshole. So there was a Don Quixote close. There was tons of different little restaurants close. Akihabara was a train stop away. Ueno was a train stop away. So we had tons of options. And there was some really cool, like old school shopping streets in Okachimachi that was fun to walk around in and check out. Tons of little vendors and restaurants and stuff and stalls underneath the train tracks. Really cool. So the hotel was great. It had, it also had like, a washing machine and dryer. So you could use it to, freshen up your clothes and things. It had really great multilingual staff. In fact, there was an American girl who spoke unbelievable Japanese, by the way, that worked at the front counter. There was a couple of different foreigners that worked at the front counter. And then there was, of course, Japanese that worked there. But it was kind of on a side street, so it was quiet. It was great. We loved it. If you're traveling to Japan with a family and you're going to, any of the major cities, if you can stay at one of these hotels, I would highly recommend them because they're great. So what do you do in Tokyo, right? There's a million damn lists out there and a million videos and a million podcasts, right? Of people telling you, what to do when you visit. And I guess I'll join in on that. But from my perspective, well, first let me tell you kind of my take. There's so many people out there and you hear so many things about what's the hidden gem? What's the secret place to go to? And look, every traveler loves to find out about those hidden gems, those secret places that you can go check out that the internet hasn't discovered yet, or that Instagram hasn't discovered yet, or that travel influencers haven't discovered yet. That's great. I mean, look, to go to a unspoiled, not busy location and see something beautiful, whether it's a waterfall or a building or a mountain or whatever, museum, it can be anything. That's a really cool feeling and it's exciting. And for somebody that travels, hell yeah, that's what I want, right? But let me caution you, don't take that too much to heart. You're a tourist. You're in this country to see it. There's a lot of tourist things and people will say, oh, it's too touristy. Whatever, this museum or this area of town or whatever is too touristy. That's bullshit. Okay. I'm just going to tell you right now, complete and utter bullshit. It's touristy for a reason, probably because it's badass. It's awesome. It's worth seeing. It's worth your time. So go see it. Be a tourist. You're a tourist. Go experience it. I'm not saying not try to find these hidden gems or not explore parts of town that may not be so, looked upon highly from a traveler influence or whatever. I'm not saying don't go experience and explore those neighborhoods because walking down random streets in a city is pretty neat thing, especially, like in a place like Tokyo. But man, there's a ton of tourist attractions in Tokyo and around Japan. Go see the damn things because they're fucking awesome, right? Experience it. Don't worry about what somebody else says about, oh, it's too touristy. Bullshit. Go see it. It's probably going to be pretty kick-ass. I mean, most of the places that I have been to in Japan at this point would be probably considered touristy. I mean, I've probably wandered onto a couple of little hidden gems here and there, but it's all touristy. But I mean, there's 30 some odd million people in Tokyo, and there's millions and millions of people coming to Japan every year to visit it. They're all going to be touristy at this point. There's just too many people. So just go enjoy the good stuff. Go enjoy the touristy stuff. So I got to experience one thing on this last trip with my family that I had done before, but not in the same place. And it's a really great thing to do kind of early on in your trip to really get a feel for the city as far as how big it is and really kind of just try to wrap your mind around it. So it used to be, and the very first time I went, this was the case for me, the best place to go in Tokyo to get a cool view of the city, an up high view of the city, was the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building, right? It's twin buildings stand next to each other. And I believe the observation towers, 40 something floors up, right? And they were free. And so my first trip, that's what I did. I went to the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building to go to their observation decks. And that was a really cool experience. You can see a ton of things around Tokyo. There's all these tall buildings around you. And while I was there was even a Black Hawk helicopter that landed on top of the building, right? And there was a lot of cool things to see, but you could see forever. And really, all you could see forever was Tokyo because it's just that big. It's so big that this is the first time you really see it, just the expanse in front of you. It just goes on forever. So it's a good way to kind of orient yourself and also wrap your mind around just how big the place is that you're visiting. But this year, when we went to a relatively new place to do a view of the city from up high. And that was called Shibuya Sky. If I remember correctly, I bought the tickets on Klook well in advance because this place sells out. And it does cost, to buy the tickets. You have to pay for the tickets. I don't remember it being very expensive. It wasn't ridiculous. But you have to buy tickets in advance because even when we were walking in and showing them our tickets, there was some people there that were trying to get in to buy tickets. And this was pretty early in the day. And then, the people that worked there at their information table basically told them, well, we're sorry, we're sold out for the day. So it basically sells out every day. And come to find out, one of the biggest reasons why is because the view is so amazing. So this building is built almost right next to the Shibuya Scramble. In fact, you can see it from on the very top of the building. And so what you do is you ride on this first elevator up, and then you check in, and then you ride up again on another elevator. And the elevator is kind of cool because it does like a light show on the ceiling. So it kind of gives you the feeling of just how fast you're moving and that you're going up. And it's a cool little show. I've seen it in a couple other places before, but it's cool. It's a cool little light show on the roof of the elevator. And you come out and you're on a floor that's glassed in. And I believe it's the 48th floor of the Shibuya Sky building. And it's glass. And you can see, and it's basically a 360-degree view. And there's a cafe up there, so you can get like a coffee or an ice cream. They had, soft serve ice cream, or soft cream, as it's known in Japan, which it's a really tight fight between Korea and Japan who has the best soft serve ice cream, because it's splendid in both countries. And Japan's got some really, really good ones. So if you see some soft serve ice cream, grab you a cone of it, because it's pretty damn good. But anyway, I digress because I'm distracted by ice cream. That observation deck, you see it, but you're instantly focused on getting up to the roof, right? So you actually go up onto the roof of the building, and it's got this high glass wall built around the roof. So obviously, you can't fall off the side of the building or whatever, because you're basically on the 50th floor. And it's open otherwise besides the wall, and that's, of course, glass. But you're open to the sky, and there's like an astroturf or field turf kind of like little hill that you can go up on and set. And a lot of people will go try to get sundown pictures, right? That's the busy time. Like, people will try to time their visit and then get the reservations for sundown, because obviously it's going to be really pretty from up that high and over the city. We didn't have that. We went earlier in the day. It was like 11 or something like that was when we were there. But man, that was one of the coolest damned experiences. And I'll tell you two reasons why. One, the escalator to get up to the very top, to the 50th floor from like the 48th floor, is an escalator. And it is right on the edge of the building. And the part of the escalator that's facing outward, out toward the city, at the edge of the building, is glass. It's a little nerve-wracking. I think I've said this before on this podcast. I'm not a huge fan of heights in certain situations, and this was obviously one of those. So I was glancing over some. My wife's just looking, and she's having a grand old time, and I'm a little nervous. I won't lie, but it's a pretty cool way to get up to the 50th floor. So that was really cool. And then, like I said, once you get up on the top deck, you can see forever. And one of the reasons is there's no other buildings built around Shibuya Sky that are as tall as it is. So you have an unblocked view, pretty much 360 degrees of Tokyo. And there's nothing in your way to block or to mar the view. It's amazing. It is such a cool way to see the city. And you really do get that feeling of understanding of just how big the city is and how far it goes and where they put all those people, because you see it from here, right? It's a hell of a vantage point. And so while there are other observation decks Tokyo Skytree, of course, the Metropolitan Government Building, some other places that you can go in Tokyo to see, to get a high up view of the city. I think Shibuya Sky is hard to beat because, like I said, it's got an unobstructed view. It's got all those cool things, the escalator and all. Plus, it's in Shibuya. So it's really easy to get to, right? I mean, like I said, you go to Shibuya Station and you're pretty much there. So it's really easy to get to by train or cab or whatever. But it's very accessible. And you're already in Shibuya. So when you're done, there's tons of restaurants and things to go see in that area that you can, build into your day. In fact, one of the things we did on that day was before our time, we went to Yoyogi Park, which is over near Shibuya, and went to Meiji Shrine. So we did, the walk through the park to get to the shrine. And I will say, that's another thing. Take advantage of being able to go see the different temples and shrines, especially Meiji and then Sensoji Shrine and Temple in Asakusa, because those are two of the more famous ones that you'll see. And while around Sensoji is very busy, there's a big shopping street that leads up to it. And there's a lot of people there, and there's a lot of, like stalls and shops and food, which is fun. It's kind of almost like a carnival atmosphere over there. Meiji Shrine is very muted and very quiet. It's in the middle of the park where you're walking to it, right? We walked from Harajuku Station into the park, into the shrine. And it doesn't take very long of walking into the forest, essentially, to the shrine, where you no longer can see any of the buildings of Tokyo. And it starts getting quiet and you hear some nature, you hear birds and things like that. It's a very surreal feeling and very peaceful feeling because that you're in the middle of Tokyo. But at the same time, you can't see it. You can't really hear it. It's a very calming, enjoyable place to take a nice stroll. And then, of course, at the end of that stroll is Meiji Shrine, which is just beautiful, right? It's well worth your time just to go check it out. They have, many of the little good luck charms and prayers and things that you can pick up there and leave at the shrine. And really a cool thing was the first time I went in 2018, I went to the shrine, and while I was there was a Japanese couple getting married in a very traditional style, right? They had the traditional clothing on, and the bride was under umbrellas, that were being held over them. And they kind of came in a procession by in the middle of the shrine. And it was really cool to see. So it's a very classic old shrine that is worth your time. Now, just beyond Meiji and Sensoji, there are tons of other temples and shrines in Tokyo, some of which are very much worth your time, and some you'll just stumble upon taking a walk. I did that walking from Yanaka near Napori down to Ueno. I stumbled upon a couple of really beautiful little temples that just were spectacular. So that's really cool to kind of happen upon those places. But definitely go see those two because they're super famous and they're worth getting to see. And there's such a juxtaposition between the two that it's kind of neat to see both ways. But one other shrine that I will mention to you that is harder to get to because of its location, but definitely worth going to see because it's really unique and it's actually extremely pretty. And I will tell you, if you have a cat lover in your life, if you have a got at home or your family has a cat or your daughter is in love with cats or your son's in love with cats, it's worth going to this temple called Gotoku Temple. And it's in Setagaya City, which is a suburb, but it's part of Tokyo. And it's basically west, slightly southwest of Shibuya. You can take a train out there near it, but you're going to have to walk some to get to it. But it's a nice, lovely walk through a quiet neighborhood. I remember the first time I walked to it, I was walking down this one street, and this gentleman had this little storefront, and he was roasting sweet potatoes. And it smelled so good. It was just one of those smells I've never forgotten. I always remember walking down that little street and smelling those sweet potatoes roasting. It smelled amazing. So anyway, it's a nice little walk from the train station. But this temple is basically a cat shrine, a cat temple. And when you go, there's a pagoda and there's several worship type temple buildings that are there. And kind of around the main building is these old wooden shelves, like outdoor shelves, right? And on these shelves are thousands, probably tens of thousands, if not more, of these little white beckoning cats, sort of like the little beckoning swinging arm cat, but these don't move. They're little, porcelain or clay cats, and they're all white and they're painted, and you can buy them at the temple and either leave them there or take it with you. And we have a cat at home, and my daughter loves cats, and my son he likes them fine, right? And she just loved this place. And my wife really loved it. And frankly, I did too. It's so peaceful. There's a beautiful cemetery right next to it. And it's really one of those places that's absolutely worth going a little bit out of your way in Tokyo for, because it's just so pretty and so peaceful. And the neighborhood around it is pretty peaceful. It's a nice little respite, kind of like how I talked about Meiji Shrine. But this is a lot more intimate, right? It's smaller. It's got a, cool story with the cats, and it's really neat. And I've been to it several times now. And while there's always people there, it's never super busy, right? So it's never like slammed with tons of crazy tourists and, pictures going on everywhere and you can't move. It's not that way. It's very low key, very easy to go in to see everything, and very much worth your time. So we've talked being overwhelmed by the crazy ass size of Tokyo. We've talked about some good hotel options. We've talked shrines. Now let's really get into one of my absolute favorite things, and one of the things that Japan and Tokyo especially are extremely known for, and that is food, the cuisine, Japanese food. I mean, if there was ever a mecca of food, it is Tokyo. In fact, I'm pretty certain this is still the case, but it's pretty well understood that Tokyo has more Michelin-starred restaurants than New York, London, and Paris combined. I mean, the breadth of food options in Tokyo is mind-boggling. I mean, as someone who is a massive lover of food and considers himself a pretty big foodie, man, fucking Japan and Tokyo in particular is like the best theme park on the planet if you love food, because they not only have everything, and I mean everything, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be pretty damn good. I mean, I have maybe had one mediocre meal in Japan. The rest of them have been extremely good to downright, fucking mind-blowing at how good they are. And it's shocking. I mean, when you can walk into a Family Mart or a 7-Eleven or a Lawson, the 3 largest convenience store chains in Japan. By the way, I am firmly in Team Family Mart. I know people swear by 7-Eleven. I know people swear by Lawson, but I am a devotee of Family Mart. Now, that is not to say that I will not go to a 7-Eleven or a Lawson, because I absolutely will. I do not discriminate when it comes to Japanese convenience stores. But if I have the option, I will go to Family Mart. But when the convenience stores in your country are universally known to have really good food options, the food in your country is probably pretty kick-ass. And that's the case in Japan. I mean, just the availability of food in a convenience store. Well, I'm not even just strictly referring to the brilliance that is the Japanese egg salad sandwich, which, my God, if you don't hit a convenience store very early on in your trip and enjoy the brilliance that is that egg salad sandwich, then you're doing something wrong. Make that one of your first things to eat, because people swear by them, and I'm one of them. I grew up eating egg salad, and I can just tell you right now, they put something in that egg salad in Japan that I don't understand, because between it and the bread that they put them on, I mean, holy shit, it's mind-blowing. It is life-changing how good those things are and how readily available they are. It's stunning. So, like I said, the best place to start for food, just start at the convenience store and work your way up. You know, get you a fami chiki, which is fried chicken, like a fried chicken, piece of fried chicken, boneless, that comes in this amazing packaging that you can just pull the top of it off so you don't get your hands all greasy or anything. Fresh as can be. That's at Family Mart as well. Start there, and it only gets better, right? Obviously, sushi is a huge thing for not only the Japanese people, but also the travelers, right? The people that visit Japan. I mean, when I think of Japanese food, that's one of the very first things. It's probably either sushi or ramen, you know, with a very, very close runner-up to Wagyu beef or Kobe beef. But I think when most people think of Japan, they think sushi and they think ramen. Well, if that's the case, you're in the right place, because if you're looking for sushi that is just phenomenal at every turn, it is in Tokyo. I mean, look, there are every kind of sushi restaurant too. There's stand-up sushi bars where there's no seats. You literally stand at the sushi bar and eat. There is the conveyor belt style sushi, right? Ton of those. Different ones, different brands, more lower end, more higher end ones. There's those, right? Then there's just more of a traditional sushi bar, but it's not quite that crazy high level of needing reservations months in advance, right? But it's a mid-level sushi restaurant. You can still get an omakase meal where the chef makes the decisions on what you eat, or you can order off of a menu. And then there is the super high-end, famous, impossible to get into sushi places where there's only a couple of seatings a night. You need reservations well in advance. It's going to cost you several $100s, and the sushi master is going to choose every course for you based on whatever was good at the market that morning or the morning before. It's all super fresh, world-class sushi. I mean, it's a full experience to sit at an omakase meal with a absolute sushi master. So no matter what your budget, no matter what your taste, you can get it in Japan. And because of their connection with the ocean, the freshness and the quality of the seafood, even in the cheaper sushi restaurants, is going to be phenomenal. It's just as fresh as you can get. Now, I will go ahead and say there are two places, and both of them are considered conveyor belt sushi restaurants, but let me just say they're not really. They're somewhere between like conveyor belt sushi restaurants, because you can pull some stuff off the conveyors, and that mid-level sushi restaurant, right? The food quality and the sushi quality, the fish and the shellfish and everything is super high quality. These places are very, very famous and are well known by the Japanese and go there a lot. For the most part, most of us, we can't go to omakase meals every night, right? We can't eat world-class sushi master sushi every meal. One, you can't get the reservations. And two, I mean, nobody can afford that, or 99% of people can't afford it. I certainly can't. So you find those gems, those restaurants that produce super high quality, but at a reasonable price, right? And these two restaurants do that. The first place I'll mention is probably my absolute favorite. If I want sushi in Tokyo, this is the very first place that I think of, and the place that I absolutely have to go to every time I'm in country. I've seen a ton of different variations of the name, but I'll give you kind of a common name for it. So the common name of it is Katsu Midori, right? And it is on the 8th floor of the Seibu department store that is connected to Ikeburo Station. So it's right on the Yamanote line. You get off at the station, and once you get down off the platform, you will likely see the signs directing you toward the Seibu department store. And once you get into the department store, get on the elevator and go up to the 8th floor. And the 8th floor is a restaurant floor. There's several restaurants on that floor of the department store. And one of them is Katsu Midori. And a way to kind of know it is there's usually chairs lined up right in front of it and kind of around the little corner where people sit and wait. And it's got a little machine out front that you put in your information, and it gives you a number, right? And that's how they pull people into the restaurant from that number. It is, without question, my favorite sushi. It's always busy. It has an English menu, and most of the booths and seats at the sushi bar have an iPad that you can put into English mode. And the food there is top shelf. It's incredibly good. I have eaten my weight in sushi from this place before. You know, if you're into tuna, they've got everything. If you're into really good high grade tuna, you know, you can have the high grade stuff. You can have the mid grade stuff. That's fine. The mid grade stuff is phenomenal, by the way. They also have, if you need a little break from the raw, they have this crab salad they wrap in seaweed. And that shit is addicting as hell. It is so good. Obviously, it's made with Kewpie mayo. And if you're into Japanese things, you know about Kewpie mayo. It's the main brand of mayonnaise in Japan, and it's amazing. But this crab salad is such a refreshing bite. It's so good. But I can sit in there for a very long time and drink a nice, draft beer or two and just burn through the sushi. Yeah, it's the first place I will go when I want sushi in Tokyo. I would highly recommend it, especially if you're traveling in Japan and you haven't traveled there before, or, you're only doing it for like the second time or whatever, and you want to not venture too far off the main drag, then this is a great option because it literally is on the Yamanote line. You fall right out of the station, and then right from the station into Seibu, and it's an elevator right away. And another nice thing is that since it's in the department store, after you're done stuffing your face full of sushi like I do, then you can do the other thing that I like to do there, and that is ride the elevator down to the food floors, which we can talk about in a second, and grab myself some dessert to take back to the hotel, because some of the best desserts in the world are made down there. All right. So that's my first option. That is more of a northwest side of town option, but it's my first option every time. So before I go on to my second sushi option, I want to bring up something that I mentioned a second ago. And that was the second thing that I loved about going to my favorite sushi place was it was in the department store and I could get dessert. So there's such a thing in Japan as deepa chika. And the deepa part is short for department store, and the chika part is basement. So it's department store basement, right? Well, unlike the images of a dark, dusty basement area where there's, old mannequins and old clothes and crap like that from sales gone by, in Japan, this is usually 1 or 2 floors, depending on the department store. And on these floors is I don't even know how to explain it to you, except that it's basically like a carnival of food. It's ridiculous. So you go into these floors in these department stores, and they will literally have everything. Well-known French patisseries, chocolate makers from Belgium and Switzerland, and other high-end dessert shops from around the world, including Japan. They will all have outposts in these places, right? Also, there will be like famous like chocolate brands that will have booths set up, and they sell all of their chocolates, right? And then another section of it will be like prepared savory food, like dinners, stacks of fried shrimp and beef and like literally anything that you can think of that you can eat. These places have it. And they will also have like, wine shops and high-end fruit. Like, I couldn't even explain it the first time I experienced it, when I got home. I couldn't explain it. Like, I didn't know how to put it into words, just what a carnival of food this really was. I mean, it was insane. It's like the greatest food court you've ever experienced. And there's like one after the next, every department store. Seibu, which is where Katsu Midori is a huge food hall in the basement. And the Kyo department store at the same station in Ikeburo is also a huge food floor. It's amazing. I have had some of the best cakes, strawberry cakes, peach cakes, chocolate on these floors. And so when I go and eat some sushi, after all of that, savory fish and everything else and rice, I want some sweet. And so I just hop on the elevator, go down to those bottom floors and window shop for, however long until I find, one or two things that I really am excited about. I buy them. They package them up ridiculously well. They'll always ask you, are you going to eat it right away or are you taking it home? And if you tell them that you're taking it, back to your hotel or home or wherever it may be, they will put it in these boxes and they'll put like that gel ice packs into the boxes to make sure it stays cold. And it's got these little dividers in the boxes to make sure that the cake doesn't fall over. I mean, the packaging in Japan is already spectacular, but the fact that they go to these lengths to make sure that a single piece of cake stays cool and makes it home in one piece is just, that's Japan, right? It's one of those things that's just great about Japan. They take such care with things that it boggles the mind. So anyway, do yourself a favor while you're out. If you just need a sweet treat or a savory treat, you want to go have a picnic, go to one of these department stores. They're all over, especially around the major train stations. Go downstairs, get you some food, take your bags, go find your little park or a park bench or whatever and enjoy it because it's amazing. All right, back to the sushi. Now, my second option is closer to the east side of town. In fact, it's not that much harder to get to. It's at Tokyo Station, again on the Yamanote line, and it's in the Kite building, which is across the street from Tokyo Station. So you literally ride the train to Tokyo Station, you come out of Tokyo Station onto the street, you'll see the building, you'll cross one street, go into the Kite building, and get on the elevator. So this restaurant is called Nemuru Hanamaru, and it's on the 5th floor of the Kite building. Again, it's a sushi, quote unquote, conveyor belt sushi place, but it's a lot more than that. The quality is just fantastic. And this restaurant it's a chain, right? So there's more than one of them, but it was started in Hokkaido, maybe in Sapporo, but it is, again, world-class fresh sushi, just phenomenal quality. And the chefs are fantastic. And it's got a really cool setup because it's got they've renovated it lately. So I don't know if it's still this way, but it used to be, and maybe still is, they had the sushi making station was kind of in the middle of the restaurant. And it was almost like a big rectangle. And you could sit there right at the sushi bar. They had little slips of paper with a pencil. and you could mark up what you wanted and you could hand it directly to the chef and he would take it and make it for you. And then they also had, stuff on the conveyor and other options of how you could order, obviously, if you were sitting at one of the booths, not right in front of the sushi chefs. But there's always a line. There's always a little bit of a wait, but it's well worth your time because, again, the sushi is really, really good. So if you're on the east side of town in that Akihabara, Ueno, Tokyo Station area, and you're craving some sushi, some really good sushi that's not going to completely break the bank, then this is a great, great option. All right. So we've talked hotels. We've talked sushi restaurants. We've talked convenience stores. We've talked temples and shrines. So now in an attempt to not make this the world's longest podcast, I'm going to mention a few other kind of can't miss attractions, at least for me, that are not necessarily really specific to Japan, but are such cool things to see that it's worth taking the time to go see them. And then we can wrap this episode up. So as I mentioned before, my family and I recently traveled to Tokyo and Kyoto. And two things that we did that I absolutely loved. One, I was pretty sure I was going to really enjoy. And the other one, I really did not know. It could be awesome. It could suck. I had no fucking clue. But they both turned out to be amazing. The first place was Warner Brothers Studios' The Making of Harry Potter. And the second place was the Teen Labs Borderless art installation. The Making of Harry Potter experience, it's actually really easy to get to. You take the Yamanote line from wherever you're staying to the Ikebukuro station. And then from that station, you transfer onto a local train and ride about 20 minutes or so to Toshimen Station on the Seibu line. So it's really easy to get to in that it doesn't require hardly any transfers from line to line to get there. So then you get there and the train station, Toshimen Station, is kind of designed after Harry Potter. The colors make sense if you're a Harry Potter fan, and the signage in the station, and there's some statues of Patronuses and such there at the station. It's really cool. And it's kind of an interesting area in that when you get out of the station, it feels very park-like. And in fact, you kind of walk down this little path through what seems like a park. And then the next thing you know, you're in the grassy area leading up to the main entrance. Now, you have to have a ticket and a reservation to go to this experience, which I would get as early as you can because it is exceedingly popular. There's a lot of Harry Potter fans and just a lot of people that want to see it. So it gets a ton of traffic. We actually got our reservations on a weekday, which helped. And also they were pretty early in the day after it opened. I think it opened like at 10, and I think our reservations were like at 10:30 maybe or 10:45. So going at that time really kept the crowds down for when we first got there. And basically what you can do is you can enter into the experience up to an hour before your reservation time. And once you go in, you can either go to the restaurants, there's a couple of restaurants there, or there's also a Harry Potter store. Now, I'm a memorabilia guy. I love collecting certain things. I'm particular about what I collect, but there are certain things I really like to collect. So this store was a just treasure trove of unique items. It's Harry Potter collectibles and gear and shirts and wands and everything that you can't get anywhere else in the world. Obviously, there is some things that you can get at other Harry Potter places like at Universal and such, but there's a bunch of Tokyo specific merch, which is right up my alley because I like the more exclusive, limited edition things that you can get your hands on, because I don't collect in mass. I collect in very specific little niches. So anyway, that is a great time to go and look through the store before you do your tour, so that you can kind of pick out what you want. So when you're a little bit more tired because you've been going through all the exhibits and everything at the other end, you're not walking in there and just grabbing stuff. You go in and you've got a really good idea right from the beginning. So anyway, you go through and they have an amazing setup on the tour. So they have a full-size replica of the Great Hall at Hogwarts. They've got the actual costumes that were worn by the characters. They've got, the Sorting Hat and Professor McGonagall's outfits and Snape's outfits. Anyway, they've got them all, and they're all the real thing. And then they've also got exhibits of Dumbledore's office and the Ministry of Magic and the common rooms and the sleeping rooms of like Slytherin and Gryffindor. They've got Diagon Alley set up. It's super immersive. I don't want to give a ton of it away, but it's immersive. It's really amazing. It's not only getting to see these life-size replicas of the places you see in the movie, which is really cool experience, but it's also getting to see how they made the movie magic. They focus in on a lot of how they made things, you know, how they created these characters, how they used the CGI and then the lighting and the music. They go through it all. About halfway through the tour, there's a restaurant, like a cafe, and a small shop where you can sit down, have butterbeer, do a little bit of shopping if you want before you continue on. And then you continue on with the tour. They have, of course, the Hogwarts Express with a full platform built out. It looks very authentic. A lot like if you've been to Universal Studios in Orlando. It looks very much similar to that. The same kind of scale, the same size. And then you finish out the rest of the tour. You know, you go through Diagon Alley, and it's amazing. Like I said, I don't want to give too much of it away, but trust me, even if you're not a Harry Potter fan, I think you would be really impressed and find it interesting of how they did everything, how they made this magic happen. And they took this series of books and made them into these movies and became a cultural phenomenon. And it still is to today. So we get done. We're super happy. We've had a great time. The kids are ready to buy some souvenirs. I'm ready to get a few, and so is my wife. So we go in and we get some really neat stuff. We were also able to get some of the anniversary merch, like a lithograph, like a print, and a pin, sort of like Disney pins. We got that. My daughter, my son, and myself, we all got wands. Got the ones that are exclusive to the Tokyo location. So that's always cool. I like to collect the wands. Just as a personal side note here, my character in Harry Potter is Sirius Black. I love Sirius Black. So I have his wand and his poster and things like that. I'm a big Sirius Black guy. So that's what I focused in on when I was there. Anyway, it's an amazing experience. If you're in Tokyo and you're there long enough to be able to take in some strictly Japanese things, do this because it is definitely worth it, especially if you have any Harry Potter fans in your family or your traveling party, or if you have any like movie fans, right, that get into the kind of the technical side of movie making and things. They would appreciate it as well because they talk a lot about that on the exhibit. And then the last thing that I would say to do that is very unique, and that is Team Labs. So there's two Team Labs installations in Tokyo. One is Team Labs Planet and one is Team Labs Borderless. Now I'll say my wife wanted to do this, and I think my daughter was really into it as well. They had seen it on, TikTok or Instagram or whatever. And, I looked at it, and it's kind of like an art installation, but with like lights, and I don't even really know how to explain it with these kind of, I got all these different kinds of rooms. Right, when you go in there, and it's all, it's playing with the refraction of light and color and, all these different kind of visual sensations, right? I was kind of skeptical that whether I would like it or not. But let me tell you, we went to Team Labs Borderless, and that was absolutely amazing. You get inside of the building, and you are just immersed in these lights and color and different ways of presenting these lights and color in these different kinds of rooms. And it's different moods. It feels different. There's music playing over the top of the lights. It's a vibe, man. It's really pretty cool. There was this one room where they did this projections of these, like it almost felt like you were underwater, or like another part of it felt like you were in space, right? And it's really immersive, and you could actually go up and touch some of the fish on the videos, right? And they would turn into something. Or there was one, I forget what it was initially, but my daughter touched it and it turned into butterflies, right? It's really cool. So that is an awesome way, especially when it's, hot outside. Man, it's a great way to go spend a couple of hours just strolling through these exhibits and experiencing this kind of surreal world. And it's, obviously indoors and it's air conditioned. So it's a nice break from the heat. Also, if you're really like into Instagram and stuff, Man, the opportunities for those types of pictures in this place are everywhere. I mean, nonstop. But I will say, just like Harry Potter, this is something that you're going to want to buy your tickets for early, way ahead of time, and just get you a set reservation time that you're going to go, because it sells out as well. And if you try to go the day of, kind of like when I talked about Shibuya Sky, you will get turned away because they will be sold out. I think they're probably sold out pretty much every single day. Anyway, make your reservations early, but go experience it because it's a cool thing to do. Kids will like it. You'll like it. Crosses all kind of ages and likes and everything else. It's really, really neat. Okay, so here's the deal. There's tons more to do in Tokyo, and I'm sure I'm going to be doing additional shows on Japan and Tokyo down the road. The next show in this series will be about Kyoto. I definitely want to get a conversation in on Kyoto. It's a magical, magical place and feels totally different from Tokyo. So we're going to talk about Kyoto next time on this series, but we will definitely get back into some other little fun things to do in Tokyo. Maybe on a ramble episode or something, I'll review a couple of them because there's tons of other things to see and do. If I were to talk about them all, we'd be here all day. You don't want to listen to a podcast that long. And frankly, it probably wouldn't sound great because that's way too long to have to listen to me talk. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode because I loved putting these episodes together. I love Japan, as it's probably pretty evident. I think it's an amazing country, not just the cities, but the countryside and everywhere in between. It's got a ton of history, a ton of culture. The people are fantastic. You know, the opportunities for adventure and to see things that you don't regularly get to see at home, you know, is so high there that I think you continue to travel there, you know, for the rest of your life, and you would never get bored. You would always find something new and amazing to do. So please take the opportunity, if you get it, to go to Japan and really experience it, because it is absolutely worth it. So I hope you got some new ideas about how to experience Tokyo from this episode. And like I said, the next episode will be on Kyoto, and we'll finish out the series. To everyone that has been listening, and I've said this a couple of times now, but to everyone that has been downloading the episodes and listening, and also shout out to the folks, whoever you are, because I can't see it, who gave some 5-star reviews on Spotify. Thank you so much. That means the world. It really, really helps the podcast get more notice and be found easier when people are searching for travel podcasts. So thank you so much for that. And I would encourage everyone else, if you like the podcast, if you really enjoy it, and I hope you do, please take the time on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to review the show, leave it a rating, write out a review. It doesn't have to be long, but, you know, just kind of what you like or why you like it. And that would be greatly appreciated. Also, please, you know, check us out on Instagram and Threads and TikTok. Follow those accounts. I try to post content on there that kind of matches up with the episodes. So like, for example, the Ramble episode on Qatar Airways just dropped the other day. And so I put out a big spread of pictures on Instagram about those flights, some of the food, some of the airplanes, some of the seats, those types of things. So check those out. If you want to reach out to us, the email address is in the description. So please feel free to, you know, shoot us your comments or suggestions or whatever you have to say. Feel free to do it. But yeah, just share the show. I mean, if you think you know some people that might be interested in this podcast that are into travel and experiences and adventure and things like that, share the show with them and let them know that it exists. And hopefully we'll continue to grow our community and get bigger and bigger. And that way I can continue to do this and share more and more experiences as we go along with you. So again, thanks to everybody for listening, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Thanks. Bye.
This has been Tray Tables and Time Zones. Worldwide travel is one of the funnest things you can do in life. And it's our passion to talk about the good, the bad, the funny, and the ugly. Nothing is off limits. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram at Trade Tables and Time Zones. And for questions or comments, send your email to traysandtimes@gmail.com. Take care. and see you next time on Trade Tables and Time Zones.